I'm here in the garden at St. Stephen's Catholic Church in Portland, Oregon, and today is the second day in our novena to Saint Philomena, Virgin and Martyr. And we left off yesterday at a pretty exciting moment, although nothing had happened yet. But we had considered the history and the making of the catacombs and how those came to be, and excavations and prayers, etc., made there. But what we're about to hear is so exciting. Let us listen to the account of the finding of the body of Saint Philomena. It was on May 24th, 1802, that the excavators came on a loculus that had never been violated. Everything pointed to the fact that the chamber was exactly as it had been when the precious remains were enclosed there long centuries before. The discovery was looked upon from the first as something remarkable, and the opening of the sarcophagus was marked for the very next day, May 25th. On arriving at the spot, the learned custodian noted that the vault was walled up with 3 terracotta slabs on which were depicted in red the symbols of martyrdom, and they bore the following inscription: Lumina Paxte cum fi. Lumina Paxte cum fi. Now, it would seem that the slabs had been misplaced, as happened so often in the necessary haste of burial, and the first slab should have been placed in the 3rd place, and when this is done, the inscription becomes at once clear: Paxte cum fi lumina. Peace be with you, Philomena. This loculus, or tomb, is considered an excellent specimen of its kind and is rendered exceedingly valuable by the inscription on it of the very name of the martyr whose remains were therein enclosed, a fact of rare occurrence. In addition to this inscription, there were various emblems painted on the slabs. First, there was an anchor, which from its resemblance to the cross was looked on as an emblem of hope. It is also at times a sign of martyrdom, as anchors were fastened to the neck of some of the confessors when they were thrown into the sea. And some think that St. Philomena was cast into the river Tiber. Second, there were 2 arrows, one pointing upward and the other downward. These 2 might betoken the kind of death which the martyrs suffered, as some were shot to death with arrows. And third, there was a lance, which might have had a similar significance. Fourth, there was a palm, the emblem of the martyr's triumph. And fifth and lastly, there was a lily, an emblem of purity. Upon entering of the tomb, the relics of a virgin martyr were found, with a glass vase containing a portion of her blood in a dried form. The dried blood found in vials close to the martyr's resting places had been subjected at various times to chemical tests and proved to be blood. Now, there's a footnote here. Small vessels of aromatic spices, it is true, were also placed near the sepulchres with the intention of purifying the heavy atmosphere of the catacombs. The 2 facts are independent of each other and are in no wise contradictory. So that is why they analyzed the blood, or they analyzed the specimen to see whether it was blood or something else. So it was blood. And in the case of the blood of St. Philomena, we have a far higher guarantee of its genuineness than any given by such process. The wonders wrought daily and by this precious relic, and witnessed by countless pilgrims as well as by keen ecclesiastical experts, furnish us with a supernatural proof of the authenticity of the relic. Now, the bones, the ashes, and the blood of the saint were carefully placed in a wooden case, which was closed and sealed in 3 places. This was borne above ground, where it was again opened and minutely examined by experts, among whom were doctors, surgeons, and theologians. The skull was found to have been fractured. The bones were apparently those of a girl, and the doctors surmised that she was 12 or 13 years of age. Saint Philomena goes to Naples. Little indeed is known historically of our saint previous to her glorious martyrdom. Her real history commences when her blessed remains were found in May of 1802, after having rested in the obscurity of the catacomb of St. Priscilla for upward of 1,700 years. After the final examination of the relics, a document was made out and placed in the case containing the remains. This was once more closed and sealed and deposited in the chapel or treasury, where the bodies of saints and martyrs were kept, awaiting the Holy Father's orders for bestowal on some church. Well, 3 years later, namely in 1805, the Bishop of Potenza arrived in Rome, accompanied by a humble priest from Mugnano del Cardinale, a village not far from Naples, in the Diocese of Nola. And during his stay in the Eternal City, this good priest, Don Francisco de Lucia, did all in his power to achieve the great ambition of his life, namely, to secure the body of some virgin martyr for his church. To this end, he obtained permission to visit the treasury of relics, where, at first, he was perfectly unmoved. As he approached, however, the spot where the relics of St. Philomena were deposited, an indescribable emotion took possession of him, and he felt all at once a burning desire to obtain these precious remains. While insurmountable difficulties arose, it was against the custom to bestow such treasures on a simple priest. His petition was absolutely and irrevocably refused. An intimate friend of his, seeing his distress, succeeded by personal influence in getting for him the body of another saint, which he reluctantly accepted in lieu of what he so earnestly craved for. And during the negotiations for the relics, Don Francisco was consumed by fever, lost all appetite, and fell seriously ill. The Bishop of Potenza became seriously alarmed for his life. One evening, while the good priest was brooding over his disappointment, a sudden inspiration came to him. He promised to take Saint Philomena as his special patron and to take her to Mugnano, if only he could get possession of her relics. He was instantly cured. Both he and the bishop were convinced that the cure was a miracle of the saint, and shortly after, the apparently insuperable difficulties were removed, and Don Francisco became the happy possessor of the ashes, the bones, and the blood of Saint Philomena. From this moment forward began an uninterrupted series of miracles and wonders, the like of which have been rarely or perhaps never seen in the history of the Church. The sick were healed, the dying restored to health, sinners were converted, and evil-minded men punished. Imagine that. Prodigies the most extraordinary, graces the most abundant, blessings the most copious were the daily fruits of the little saint's intercession. Well, the bishop and Don Francisco, deeply grateful for the latter's wonderful cure, promised to take the holy relics in their own carriage and give them the place of honor. The day of departure arrived. The bustle and fuss of preparation drove the promise out of the heads of the travelers. One thing, however, they made perfectly sure of, and that was that the relics were safe. They were placed under the seat occupied by the bishop and securely fastened. Scarcely, however, had his lordship taken his place in the carriage when he felt sharp blows on his legs. He was forced to get out, and gave orders to the coachman to fasten the box more securely. It was, however, perfectly clear to all present that the case was as secure as it possibly could be. Nothing could displace it. Well, very much surprised, his lordship resumed his seat, but the blows became again so violent that he was once more forced to relinquish his place and leave the carriage. Well, this gave occasion to new discussions and further examination. All now saw for themselves that the case was so well fastened that not even the violent jolting of the carriage could move it. And yet, the carriage had not moved a single pace. For the third time the bishop took his seat, but in vain. Again he was smitten sharply on the legs, and so severely hurt that he beat a hasty retreat, declaring that on no condition would he travel with the box where it was. "Rather," he said, "will I take it in my arms all the way." It was removed and given the place of honor in the front of the carriage, whereupon all trouble ceased, and the journey was begun. Only now did our travelers recollect their promise, and at once recognized in the unaccountable blows the wish of the saints that her rights should be respected. Full of reverence and awe, these holy men took off their hats, and with cheeks bedewed by tears, tenderly and repeatedly kissed the blessed relics. Well, the rest of the journey to Naples was happily made. Our travelers lodged in a house of a good friend, where the relics were encased in a statue of the saint, specially made for the purpose, and this in turn was placed in a casket of precious wood. The lady of the house, who was suffering from an incurable disease of long standing, proceeded with the help of others to robe the statue in precious garments. While they were thus engaged, the face of the statue was seen to undergo repeated changes of expression, and the relics exhaled a most delightful perfume. Before leaving the family which had given her so warm a reception, Saint Philomena restored to perfect health the good lady of the house, to the great joy of her friends, who had entertained the gravest fears for her life. From Naples to Mugnano. Well, after a short delay in Naples, our travelers resumed their journey toward Mugnano, where the news of their approach caused the liveliest emotion, and the good people gathered in crowds to welcome their celestial patron. Various prodigies occurred during the short journey, which was made on foot and during the night. Finding the darkness too intense to proceed, the bearers of the casket called on the blessed martyr for help. Immediately, a small break in the clouds allowed the light of the moon to fall on the road around the little procession, which was thus enabled to proceed with perfect safety. Well, later on, as the procession was passing Cimitile, the relics became unaccountably heavy, causing the bearers great difficulty in carrying them. Cimitile in olden days had been the scene of countless martyrdoms, and the saint wished, it would seem, to tarry a little near the glorious battlefield, bathed by the blood of her fellow martyrs. Well, the whole neighborhood was at this time suffering from drought, and the cry arose from the multitudes that came flocking from all parts to welcome the saint. If she really wishes to show her power, let her get us the rain we so much need. Almost immediately, torrents of rain poured down, to the delight of the peasant folk, who saw in the fact a manifest answer to their prayer. And still more striking was another prodigy. The group of travelers bearing the relics arrived in Mugnano as the dawn was breaking over the hills. The roads were now thronged with crowds gathered together from all the neighborhood. It was necessary to pause while the enormous throng was being mustered for the procession. At this moment, a mighty whirlwind arose, and this came sweeping over the hillside. So appalling was this tempest that the people were terror-stricken. The cry arose on all sides, "God and Saint Philomena, save us!" One of the priests, addressing the frightened people, bade them fear nothing, for the storm was stirred up by the demons, who recognized in Saint Philomena the same dauntless virgin who had so confounded them 17 centuries before, and was now coming again to put them to shame and snatch from them their victims. Still the wind shrieked and whistled in the most alarming way, approaching rapidly the spot where the relics were resting. And here it suddenly stopped, as if held at bay by an invisible power. And instead of sweeping past, as one would naturally have supposed, it mounted into the air and disappeared. Again and again it recommenced with relentless fury during the procession, but was powerless to do the slightest harm to the people. All were amazed at its manifest impotence, for it failed to extinguish a single one of the lights that were borne by the side of the relics. For 2 whole days this weird wind howled on the neighboring hills. Satan foresaw the graces that were to be so plentifully showered on this favored neighborhood, and he vented his rage in a vain display of baffled hate and fury. A great change soon became visible in Mugnano. Blessings were granted in rich abundance. Miracles of all kinds showed the wondrous power of the saint. The faith of the people grew in intensity, and the sanctuary soon became known far and wide by reason of the marvelous favors according to the pilgrims who flocked to the feet of the little saint. End of chapter 2. And we will stop there for today. What an exciting story this is. Well, let us now go and pray our Novena prayer. Well, actually, we're going to pray it right here, but you're going to have to click on the link in the description below this video for that video, and you can pray along with me the Novena prayer there. And if you'd like to pray along or pray on your own, you can print out this little Novena booklet, which is also linked in the description below this video. Well, join me tomorrow for the next exciting episode of our Novena to Saint Philomena, and we will look at the marvels of Mugnano. And don't miss a day of prayer with us.